begin with the political crisis in Zimbabwe. South African government ministers are in Harare for crisis talks with Robert Mugabe and military leaders who have seized control. They are trying to negotiate a deal on the future of Zimbabwe and the man who has led the country for 37 years, who is now under house arrest. The Southern African Development Community will also hold emergency talks shortly. But Catholic cleric Fidelis Mukonori, who is taking part in the mediation effort, says President Robert Mugabe may be resisting pressure to resign.
Zimbabwe's capital, Harare, has remained peaceful and calm after the military announced it had taken control over all of the government institutions on Wednesday. Although soldiers monitored some roads and occasionally asked for identification from members of the public, people still went about their daily chores as if nothing dramatic had happened. Armored carriers cordoned off Zimbabwe's presidential seat of power and Parliament building in the capital, while helicopters circled the city center. Personnel from the president's department have reportedly been removed from their positions at the departures desk at the recently renamed Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport and have been replaced by soldiers. The Chief of Staff in Zimbabwe National Army, Sibusiso Moyo, appeared on state television early Wednesday morning, saying that the position taken by the military since the statement made by the Zimbabwe Defense Forces commander Constantino Chiwenga on Monday had reached another level. He asked people to minimize their movements, but said those going to work and within essential business sectors should carry on. Meanwhile, the head of the youth wing of Zimbabwe's ruling party publicly apologized on state television to the military, which has seized power, saying it aims to isolate criminals in President Robert Mugabe's entourage. Mugabe, still seen by many Africans as a liberation hero, is still seen in the West as a despot whose disastrous handling of the economy and willingness to resort to violence to maintain power destroyed one of Africa's most promising states. He plunged Zimbabwe into a fresh political crisis last week by firing his vice president and presumed successor, 75-year-old Emmerson Mnangagwa, known as the Crocodile, for showing traits of disloyalty.
Well, public affairs analyst Adetokunbo Pearse is in our Abuja studios to talk more on this. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa. What do you make of the political...
Thanks for having me.
What do you make of the political situation in Zimbabwe at the moment?
Well, the presidency of Robert Mugabe is the example of president for life that we have been able to do away with in many countries in Africa. And Mugabe's situation is the last relic of this despotism in Africa. So it's about time that the change occurs in Africa, in Zimbabwe. You know, he's been there for almost 40 years because they regard him as a freedom fighter and a general in the Liberation Army, and as a hero of the revolution because he's been able to work against the European settlers and has done a lot to empower the Africans, the Zimbabwean people themselves, the majority of the people. But you cannot be in government forever, and that is what he has appeared to do after getting so old on the job and after becoming very incompetent and unable to actually do most of what he needs to do. He wants to now hand over to his wife. So it appears to be setting up a family dynasty. And this intervention was meant to happen.
The future of Zimbabwe is what's up at stake here, and there's negotiations ongoing, you know, to try and sort this out. What do you think the negotiations are going to achieve at this point?
Well, what we can say is what we pray that it will achieve, and what I think it should achieve is a gradual transition to democratic rule in Zimbabwe, something they have not seen in almost 40 years, because the allegations are that President Mugabe used both blackmail and violence to win elections, election cycle after election cycle. So this time around, this intervention should lead to the democratic process actually being respected so that the people of Zimbabwe can actually vote for someone that they want to lead them in this 21st century.
The Southern African Development, Community is also holding talks to try and sort this out. Do you think that will be enough, or do you think that the international community, other members of the international community, will, intervene in this?
It's not always advisable for international communities to intervene in the internal process of other countries. They can only give advice. The people of Zimbabwe have taken control of their government, and we hope that the military will understand that, as the military has shown in other countries in Africa, that their role is just to intervene temporarily, not to take over government and stay there forever. They're not supposed to rule. So this is what the advice we'll give to the military now that is holding Mugabe under house arrest and having talks to organize a new structure of government, that they should work as intermediaries and encourage fair and free democratic elections as soon as possible, so that the people of Zimbabwe can decide for themselves the way they want to go.
The president is under house arrest, as we all know, but it seems everything is going on normally in Zimbabwe. People are going about their, daily duties as normal as possible. What do you think the citizens can do about this situation?
Well, the people will go about their business so long as there's a temporary government in power, and that is the military as we know it for now. And if things can remain calm, and there should be no violence introduced, if Mugabe is, if there's negotiations going on with Mugabe, and the negotiations are peaceful and cordially, mutually beneficial, then peace will come to Zimbabwe, and the country will move on.
Right, let's bring this home now. Nigeria has tasted, military rule before. With all the various agitations going on, people talking about marginalization and all that, what do you think we can learn from all this?
Well, what every potential president for life can learn from this is that they will not get away with it. Eventually, the people will stand up, and the people demand fairness, and they will demand for democracy to take hold. What's important for us, for instance, in Nigeria, is to understand that every election must be free and fair, and that whoever wins an election must be allowed to govern, and that governments in power must not continue to rig election in their favor. If they do that, they will not see peace, because the country will not allow for it anymore. We've had many years of military governments. We've seen that in Nigeria it's been a setback. We didn't make progress under military government. The military is not supposed to govern the people. The military is supposed to intervene temporarily in times of crisis. And they should do that expeditiously and go back to the barracks and wait for international crisis before they come into play. They are invited by the government to participate. They are not supposed to be in government. So Zimbabwe should learn from our past that if the military remains in government for more than necessary, in other words, for more than the time it takes to form a democratic government, then there will be problems in that country, because it will stifle progress and it will not augur for peace in that country.
Right, thank you so much, Public Affairs Analyst Adetokunbo Pearse, talking to us there from our Abuja studios. Zimbabwe, and we'll get more on this. And joining us is a senior human rights defender from Zimbabwe, Nkosazana Moyo. Thank you for your time on Network Africa. Those negotiations going on today, can you expand on this? Tell us more about it.
Yeah, we are just hearing about these talks which are said to be happening between the military, the generals, and the President Robert Mugabe. But this is more of speculation. There is nothing which has been officially confirmed to the people of Zimbabwe about these talks. What we just know as the people of Zimbabwe so far is that there's a certain Troika meeting, which has been an urgent meeting, which has been called by the certain chairperson, President Zuma of South Africa. That's what I know. We are waiting to hear about this. This is our outcome. But about this talk about meeting Mugabe and the general, I can't say anything about this because this is more of speculation and no one can really confirm about anything of that sort happening.
Can President Mugabe be persuaded to step down officially and legitimize the military's dramatic intervention?
One thing that I know, having seen President Mugabe being the only president that I've seen in my entire life so far, ever since I was born. One thing that I know is that President Mugabe loves power. He's so obsessed with power. He loves power. The only thing he can think about is power. So I don't know whether he's going to then, with this impact that's happening in Zimbabwe, if he's then going to say, I'm going to step down, or the military will end up forcing him. But deep down his heart, one thing that I know that guy will never, the president will never give power to the people in the silver planet. He does not want that. He always loves power. So we are yet to see what is going to happen with this impact we have with if he steps down, that will not be from his own will. He might be forced by the situation. And what I know is that as I'm speaking right now, he has all he's thinking about is how he can retain his power, because he loves power.
Nkosazana Moyo, thank you so much for your thoughts on Network Africa.